Hello, guys. Thanks very much for joining us this evening. Pro Snooker UK live stream. Special guest this evening is Stephen Feeney. What can I say about Stephen Feeney? He's top coach in the UK, specialist snooker, darts, coach also. Achievements: 3 world snooker champions: Stuart Bingham, Mark Williams, Roddy O'Sullivan. Founder of SiteRight. SiteRight has achieved 38 plus world snooker titles, 30 runner-ups. Steve has coached 35 tour professionals with the SiteRight methods, which is very, very significant. And he's with us, Davis. Old men now they are, We're all old men now, actually. Even Stephen. Steve as the best technical coach he's worked with. I don't know. He's achieved it all. He's done everything. So all I can do is just bring Steve in. Stephen, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, hi Dave.
All right, so we'll just let that stream build itself up again. I don't know what it is, but it's like a fade-in, Stephen, thanks for joining us. Terrific achievement, great career. The work that you've done with SiteRight. We're going to talk about all of that as we get through. We're going to touch on a lot of different matters as we go through the stream. And like always, want to bring, obviously if you're on for the first time, like all the professionals I've had on and many others, I always like to get a little bit of a background profile. And I want to start with that. I want to start with you. I want to talk about yourself. Let's start from the beginning. And how it extended itself to snooker, coaching, SiteRight.
Cool. It's a long story. I'll try and do what they call the elevator speech, but it might be 105 floors rather than 30 seconds. That was the height of the Twin Towers. 105 floors. Took a minute and 25 seconds, I think. Look, I was a pretty good sports kid. I used to play football, cricket when I was young, captain both teams, and in particular cricket. And the reason I mention cricket is because I think there's quite a strong relation into what I'll be looking at around the junior scene. Because I was a good cricketer. I was typically left-handed, writing, but I batted right-handed, bowled right-handed. And I was typically a middle off guard, which back in my day, which is 40 odd years ago, that wasn't the done thing because of LBW. And I'll hit that story a bit later, except to say that going up to a pretty good school with a scholarship, I couldn't wait to get into the county team. Couldn't wait to play cricket at the top level. And that particular sports coach would not allow me to take a middle off guard. He put me into middle leg, and I was bowled within 3 balls every single time. I used to try and get back to middle off guard, and it would be Feeney, middle leg. But sir, I get bowled out every time. Anyway, within a short space of time, total confidence had gone. Bowling, somebody bowled 10 out of 20 overs, gone. So I was a pretty good cricketer. 10 out of 20 overs in those days, when it was maximum 20 over matches. And the reason I refer to that is because I've never watched cricket since, because I was destroyed. Now, let's take a view that if that coach didn't know what he was doing to me as a junior, as a youngster, and just following a prescribed blueprint, he destroyed my game. I will explain later on, maybe we can connect the loop. But let's just remember that I'm typically left-handed, and I bowled right-handed and batted right-handed. Captain the team, batted number 1, bowled 10 out of 20 overs. destroyed. So school just became sort of academic for me, did pretty well. I went into banking, and I was introduced to snooker at the old railway club. This was young. We used to cycle down there. This is when they had the old balls, and my goodness, I could screw back one of those old balls. The length of the table, believe it or not. But then obviously the game moved forward. Schooling was more important to me, and then I kind of became more infatuated with the game in my early 20s. And I didn't really progress that quickly. It was more about league play. We won virtually every single thing in the league, from open team, handicap, you name it, we won it. We became pretty dominant. We kind of knocked out the old guard. But I learned to play the game in a social club, St. Philip's Social Club, and I think it's worth remembering them. And then as I became better, I kind of advanced up to what we knew then as the Canary Q Club. It was 24 tables reduced to 22. And I used to have my own table down what we used to call the back room. The back room was in that club was where you always wanted to get into the last 8 of the Norwich Open. And for years, I tried to win that Norwich Open. I eventually won the Norwich Open in 1997, the year that I helped Terry Griffiths retire at the Crucible. That was a year after my father died. And it's quite emotional, really. I didn't think I would sort of feel that way, but that cup was an awesome cup, and I tried for years. The back room is what we used to call it, the last 8. Through that process, I tried so many coaching books to improve my game. I knocked them on the head, and then I just played naturally. And then eventually I was playing Barry Pincher's, and I remember I missed a shot. Now, I'm left-handed as a snooker player, and I played a shot, missed it, and Barry said, "How did you miss that, Steve?" So it's all Barry Pincher's fault. The next day I went down to the local, what we know as Jarrell's in Norwich, bought How I Play Snooker by Joe Davis. And look, this book, you know, we stand on the shoulders of all of these coaches of the past. They taught what they believed they knew or how they played. And, you know, they were the gurus of the day. Within a few months, I couldn't pot a long ball. And I was known as quite you know, one of the best improvers around at that stage. So I kind of destroyed my game just following books, and went back to the books, Frank Callan's Snooker Clinic, Terry Griffiths, Jack Carnham. I studied them all, and it didn't help my game. So I was destroyed again for the second time in a sport that I loved. A good referee, sadly he's passed on now, Albert Stewart, I believe his name was, from memory. He introduced me to a good coach called John Wascott, and I used to travel to Chelmsford, and then coaching was £25 an hour. So I traveled from Norwich to Chelmsford, and I believe, sadly, some coaches are still only charging that level. And so in my field, the level of either skill or value of those coaches not moved forward with the times. But nevertheless, I paid £25 an hour for that coach, and he helped me. I started making centuries again. But as a left-hander, he taught me to play left leg on line, tape on the floor, and do all the bits and bobs that was in the Bible of those days. So white tape would go across the table on the floor under the middle pockets. I put my left leg on line, and I kind of learned to play with my left leg on line, left foot on line, the arch of my foot almost on this white tape. I started to make centuries again, but through all pro-ams and things, I never stopped studying players. And I used to copy players. So I made it my business to understand all of a different player's technique, to the point where I almost have a photographic memory for every player's technique. And if they change anything, I see it. So if Mark Selby changes something, I see it. Any player, Ronnie, you name it, if they change something, I will have already studied them. It doesn't take me long to figure out what they're doing, how they're doing it, because I used to copy things, which is how a lot of people learned how to try to improve. We used to copy things off the TV, not realizing that there was a different angle. You weren't seeing things for real unless you went to events and then saw things. Anyway, I remember putting £20 note on the table with John Wascott and saying, "You're lining me up on this shot, John. That isn't straight to me." So within my quest to find out what was wrong, I eventually got to see Frank Callan. Now, again, we're talking about, the coaches with huge prestige. To see Frank Callan was like, wow, this man will know my problem. I used to be able to pop these balls, and I've made numerous centuries, that I don't count. And I drove all the way up to Preston, and what a guy. Do you understand, I think, is how I used to remember him saying things. I went there with two objectives: to learn how I see straight, what was my dominant eye in terms of how the books used to teach. And the books only used to talk about dominant eyes. They never used to be able to prove it. And they used to have certain methods, the various different things. And over time, I proved that they're unreliable. So I wanted to know, am I online, and technique. So am I aiming? Am I sighting perfectly? And is my technique bang online? I was given the chalk test. Bless him. If he's up there listening, I hope he has a laugh at it. But I was given the chalk test, so I pointed at the chalk. I stood near the middle bag, pointed at the chalk on the far end of the black rail. So I'm at a 45-degree angle, pointing at the chalk. And did the test, and he diagnosed me as even-eyed. Okay, so for me, the best coach in the world has diagnosed me as even-eyed. Now that problem was gone. That still left me with a few questions, though, because John Wascott's got me left leg online. And my left leg is not under the center of my eyes. Mm-hmm. Make sense? Anyway, so I got home. Well, sorry, this is where the journey really began to become fun. I got to Kings Lynn, 45 miles from home. So in those days, with the cars we drove, that was another hour. Suddenly, Stephen Feeney starts to have palpitations and starts to think, wow, no, I'm not sure. I've been tested with my right hand on the chalk, but I'm left-handed. What happens if I now get to the club and I do the same test and I get a different result? So I went straight to the canary queue, set up the test, and got a different result because I pointed at the chalk with my left finger. So from right finger to left finger, why weren't the results the same? And this bothered me big time, absolutely big time. I've just been to the best coach in the world who's done the typical eye dominance test, and I just wanted to know how I see straight. I haven't found any optician who could do that up until that time anyway. And I just want to know how I see straight. How do I aim? This game is a game of geometry. Two balls, same size. How do I see straight through the center of the cue ball to line up a dead straight shot? And so it was really from there that I did the test, and I just, sadly, might seem arrogant, but at the time, how could I trust what I'd been told by what I believed to be the best expert in the game? No book could prove to me how I saw straight. No coach could prove to me how I saw straight. And to date, no player at golf, snooker, or darts, and I've challenged the best. Some won't take the test, and I've tested them, and no one has passed the tests because so many of these games are played by feel, not visual first. Now, to me, that's the cart before the horse. In an accuracy sport, we aim first, whereas Terry used to say, well, players play on feel. So I understand all that because I used to. So anyway, so now I'm in a non-believer stage again. I think, I found the results. This should be great. And eventually, I was doing what a lot of snooker players do, you go home and I was doing something on the ironing board, and suddenly something appeared to me. And from that moment on, I developed sight right. I remember the patent attorney who came round saying, wow, this is some ilk. Never seen this ilk, anything of this ilk before. And I instantly realized that sight right could be used for golf, snooker, and darts and all accuracy sports. So patented cue, patented putter. And within that field, I was able to very quickly understand how someone sees straight and how they needed to aim behind the shot, behind the cue ball. There's a biomechanical element to this, which we'll deal with at another stage. But in my life, because I stood left leg on line at a 20 degrees turn across my body to try and see the shot. If you look at Jimmy, he's quite wider. And as you grow older, your body spreads. So that degree of error becomes bigger. Your body turns and you end up with biomechanical issues. Not just from being offline, all right, but also for trying to view along the line naturally. So I've had some people on site right who have so far and lean so far across the shot to see straight through the center of the cue ball. So we're in an accuracy sport, and I've got coaches and players. Nobody has passed my tests. So that advanced bit, I'll rewind a bit. We're still in the elevator, probably about the 70th floor. At that stage, I thought, wow, I've got something. I'm onto something here. This is huge. This is huge. So I phoned Terry Griffiths and I said, Terry, because I knew he was retired, I knew he was going through the qualifiers for the World, 7 January. Terry, it was Frank who gave me his number. Bless him. So I have a lot to thank Frank for, and I have a lot to thank Terry for in a moment. So I phoned Terry. Terry, look, how do you know if you're sighting a straight line of aim perfectly? And his answer was, I don't. You better come and see me. And from there on in, through somebody like Albert Stewart, John Wascott, Barry Pinch, it's his fault. It was all his fault. Benjo Davis's book, all the books I'd studied, because I was pretty academically, intelligent. So through all the books I'd studied, all of my own analysis of players, and I've got to this moment where Terry, so I go down and see him, Terry was offline. Now, Terry was suffering with huge back problems, neck problems, needed to get through, I think it was 2 qualifiers, but I remember he beat Alfie Burden to qualify for the Crucible. So within, 3 months, January to April, 4 months, he's gone through the qualifiers. It was the first time I'd ever been to the Crucible. Still haven't won the Norwich Open, mind. First time I'd ever been to the Crucible. I sat as a VIP guest of Terry's. Now I know he could have given me better. So Terry, if you're listening, I sat as a VIP guest of his. To me, this was very special already. Right at the back of the Crucible. And when Terry walked out, there was a lump in my throat because he walked out in the first round against the world number 3 at the time, who we know as Mark Williams. And he was 9-8 in front. So I actually thought he was going to beat him. And I understand a lot of people in Wales backed him to win more than 5 frames. But the difference to Terry's game, but there was one thing that he never, and he will always say, he couldn't recognise the shots. He just knew he needed to stand in the appropriate place. His eyes had been trained offline for so many years. And Terry was always looking for the secret and the answers to beat Steve Davis, because Terry was knocked out of so many tournaments because he met Steve in the semis. So suddenly, so Terry then, on the back of this, I've gone to the awards ceremony and sat beside Lee Walker, of all people. All right. And now Lee Walker is one of my coaches, and we're doing a lot of work together as we talk about the junior scene coming through. But I've sat special VIP guest of Lee Walker, Young Player of the Year Award. And anyway, that moved on. Terry referred me to Steve Davis. He referred me to Neil Foles. He hadn't made a century for a long time. And after the session I had with Neil Foles, I believe he made 135 the next day. Now Neil's game was really struggling at the time, and he was a good friend of Terry's. So Neil Foles knows a little bit about side right and the tests that I've conducted with him. But these were on old boards and stuff that I'd pulled together. So I was kind of branded as a bit of a bank manager, a loony bank manager by Steve Davis at one stage that kind of said, could line up people for the shot, etc., etc. But actually, I did more than that, a lot more than that. And to the point where eventually Steve Davis said sight right made him feel like a player again when he got to the final of the UK champs in 2005. So I expected sort of lots of things to happen from there, and they kind of didn't, which was really weird. But in fairness, I then went, I started to look at a lot of golf. Steve Davis recommended me to Eddie Hearn for Greg Owen. Greg Owen finished runner-up at the Bay Hill after me working. I had Eddie Hearn texting me constantly from the Bay Hill International, Greg's he's putted another 25-foot putt. So they kind of got me into the golf where I probably, snooker was my passion. But in golf, Greg Owen, Stevie Gallagher helped him get to the Ryder Cup and win the Dubai Desert Classic twice. Darren Clark, when Darren Clark won in 2008, hadn't won for 5 years. That was a phone call from me to Chubby. So all of these things, I could help people identify if they were offline. But in turn, let's remember, if you're offline, you're probably manipulating your technique. You're probably manipulating your stance and your cue action.
Is this a cross dominance thing? You're trying to help people with. I mean, I'm right-handed and left-eyed, which is a bit of a problem for me because I don't feel like I'm laying in the shot up properly. Is this predominantly a cross dominance problem with you guys?
No, it's not. Someone said, I think it might have been Alan McManus said recently that an inside dominant eye is the best you can have. I never used to believe that. I actually used to believe that the outside dominant eye was the best because, especially if someone was setting you up right-handed, right leg on line, you wanted to be right-eyed. Because if you were left-eye dominant, then you'd be all over the shop. And, I have a big problem, when I look through the game and I eventually got the sight right cue sanctioned by the WPBSA, Jason Ferguson has said sight right should be in every cue. And he must have said that to me, I don't know, 30 times, every time I see him virtually. And I think sometimes I was ahead. I was ahead of the game. I was ahead of a time when people would want to listen and would want to listen to somebody challenging, what was in the script for so many years. And I think that tells quite a story. And I think what backs that up is the first outside Greg Owen, I saw Nick Faldo at Brockett Hall. And Nick Faldo went through the tests and his swing coach got so angry behind him to the point where Nick Faldo said to his swing coach at the time, well, you come and have a look. You'd be tested. And he was offline too. And he couldn't handle it. So let's imagine that someone like me 20 odd years ago is Steve Davis. I think, my wife was there. He just said, well, you're a genius. And, I remember him saying that in his room, and so there's a part of me that kind of figures, okay, so, where is the game? Where is the WPBSA with sight right at this stage? Because I have coaches coming to me. But let's remember that we have, people who have supposedly known everything, done everything. The textbook is written, the tablets of stone are there, and the paradigm shift has come along that says, you got that wrong. That's not entirely right. Those tests are not reliable. You're offline. I've shown it to you. I've proven it to you. So how are you going to deal with that? Now that is like me saying, you've been driving a car, sat in the passenger seat for 20 years, and I put you into the driver's seat, and instead of looking left to right, you think you're looking right to left because your eyes have been trained to look left to right for so many years.
Steve, the process. I mean, this is going to be a little bit complicated for some of the viewers here, some of the young players who are watching this, trying to understand or get the grips of the process of explaining what sight right. So if a player with some ability comes to you and wants to improve a lot of the things, let's just talk us through the kind of process that you would go through on the table.
I think the first thing I will say to a player is, look, you come to me because you want to change. You know that there's something wrong in your game. And what I will do is show you the truth. I will show you how you see straight. I will prove to you how you see straight. And from that information, I will then help you realign your technique and develop the correct stance and the correct cue action aligned to how you see straight. And in doing so, once I've learned how you see straight, you will learn to trust me that I will put you on the line of aim for every shot, even though you can't recognize it initially. So that process becomes, wow, when they take the test and they see different shots around the table, that they're actually way offline in the way they're sighting and way they're standing behind the shot. Essentially, their standing position behind the cue ball is offline. And they're trying to do all sorts to get their eyes on the line first. So that some people say the head is in the wrong position. No, it's your eyes. It's like me giving you shoot. It's like me giving you a gun and you're looking across the sights on a gun purposely. And you've actually been coached to do that. I like it. And you've actually been coached to look across the sights purposely because the sights aren't there to prove that you're looking straight. You know, so suddenly I kind of put the sights on this individual, but they can't see that yet because they've been looking across the line, or they've been totally field orientated. So then what I do is I take them first through the tests, show them how they see straight, learn how they see straight. I'll tell you a story about this one in a minute. You'll like it. Learn how they see straight, the hidden stuff, the facts. Learn how they see straight. Then I take them through a technical process to help them learn to step into the shot, to drop the butt of the cue on the line of aim from the standing position. Now that's very important. So they learn to stand perfectly behind the line of aim first before they step into the shot to drop the butt of the cue on the line of aim that they chose. Any fool can put the tip of the cue to the cue ball. If the butt of the cue is offline, you're going to cue through offline or you're going to manipulate through. So I will challenge anybody in terms of those elements. You can hit a cue ball dead straight and you can sight straight to the center of the cue ball and you can put the butt of the cue bang on the center line of the cue ball to deliver straight through the cue ball. Now that gives us some huge advantages, which are for another day perhaps. And to do that, so they learn to stand behind the center line of the cue ball, step into the shot, drop the butt of the cue on the line of aim, on the line of aim that they chose. So now they can at least trust that even if they've got the angle wrong, they've done what they should do for the line of aim they chose. Now then what I do is I pull together a huge number of really important sight-right routines to help them recalibrate where they need to be stood behind the cue ball for every angle. And that can happen pretty quick for some people, others take a bit longer. But the one thing that I never have to do, so I've dealt with perfect, the way they see straight first of all. Now I'm helping them understand how they use that knowledge to then work their technique. And I work their stance, their cue action, and you know, I'll have to say they're the easiest things to do. Cue action can be a bit different, but the technique, putting your right foot here and your left foot there and putting your left leg online and your right leg online, that's the hokey cokey to me, I'm afraid. Hate to say it, but it is. And, you know, I know that there are certain players even now that think they're sighting perfectly and they aren't. And I have proof of it. I have proof of it. I'm not going to name any names at the moment, but I have proof of it. I study them. Okay, so that's my job. So once we turn around and get that player sighting perfectly, learning to sight every line of aim perfectly, there's now no more guesswork. So they learn to step into the shot, form a great stance, a professional stance, as I will call it, and a cue action that now drops into position with that stance. And it's almost as if we were made to play snooker, most people. There's only a few times where we have a problem physically. Some people would say, and I'm going to mention his name, some people would say Stephen Lee. He was a great cueist. If I'd have sight-righted Stephen Lee, I'd have been very proud. Because Stephen Lee is an awesome player because he's got a lot of things going right all at the same time. Okay? Now, whether or not he fell onto that naturally, even John Higgins has tried to move his sighting line. All the history and all the tapes show you. So here's then what Stephen Feeney's party trick is. And I did this with Andy Goldstein and Ronnie in the Eurosport studio. It's never come to light. I'm going to talk about it. Facts. Andy asked me to demonstrate. So I demonstrate with Andy. I said, okay, set up a ball wherever you like. So he sets up a ball, the cue ball in bulk. I said, okay, I've already worked out how he sees straight. Without any tests. So I've got it to that level. Anyway, so I then said, okay, you line up for that shot the way you line up and just run it in gently. So he does, and he misses it, and he misses it in, which I knew he would. Okay, I said, okay, now trust me. Set the shot up again. Cameras were on this time, so we set him up. I move him to behind the line for him to step in, and he drops it in dead weight. The camera was behind my head, so he didn't see it. So Andy goes, can you do anything better than that? I said, okay. I said, come on then. So we went again. He set the balls up. Ronnie was standing behind him. I'm standing in front of him. The cameras are doing the right thing now. And I've moved Andy to the correct siding line. He's come down on the shot. And now I've asked him to close his eyes on his paws. And he's dropped the ball in dead weight, perfect, with his eyes closed. They have that footage. Facts. That's how good. So I can learn to see how someone sees straight. I know every line of aim from the other end. Sad, isn't it? But I do. And I can make sure that once I know how someone sees straight, I put them on that line of aim for the shot, for them to step in, drop the butt of the cue on line, and just drop the ball in. And that is a bigger wow factor than when they first realised that they were offline. And when that happens, when they realise they're offline...
No, can you recognise that, Steve, when you watch a player? I mean, I know you coach everybody, but when you watch players on TV that you've never met before, players on the tour who play, can you recognise these things as soon as you watch them play?
Yeah.
And say to yourself,
easy.
I can help him.
Easy.
I can help him. I can help him improve so much.
Yeah. Everybody was wowing about Sam Craigie this year. I did 24 hours with Sam Craigie on the table. Everybody was wowing over his improvement, you know. And listen, I used to learn in a high performance arena that you can give the best plan to everybody. So you can have the best plan in the world. You can have the best coaching program in the world. You can have the best performance plan in the world. You can have the best business plan in the world. But the person who works it the best gets the best results. So when I turn around and look at what SiteRight does, I take a view that says SiteRight is in two parts. Chris Henry likes to call it the visual side. I will call it the perfect siding and aiming, to understand how you see perfectly straight for every shot. If you're not doing that, then you've got a compensation going on, which will inevitably, more often than not, lead to some form of manipulation in the technique. Okay? It'd be like you trying to sight and aim a gun to the left of it and then firing and moving it to the right. So you need to manipulate to aim perfectly. So when we turn around and look at those two sides, perfect sighting and aiming, understanding how you see straight, how can a coach really coach a player in accuracy sport unless they understand exactly how they see perfectly straight? Is that not where an accuracy sport starts? How you wouldn't even begin to fire a gun until you've aimed it perfectly.
Well, it's very much like
then the technical side follows. So the technical side for me starts as easy as like put. Sorry.
Same discipline with target shooting, precision target shooting is sight picture, timing.
Yeah.
Very similar to snooker.
Yeah, and then the technical side comes with the technique and the cue action. Now I will take people through, believe it or not, a lot of long shots eyes shut. And there are different reasons, which I'm not going to go into them, but there are very, very strong reasons why I do this. So, for example, I'll have 8 long shots, and I'll look for them to be potted with eyes shut. And there are players that have done it. You know, and these are long pots. So these are long pots, eyes shut on the pause. And I mean at pace. So if you look at someone like Mark, when he was having a bit of fun in the world, in the 2018 world, where he was closing his eyes, it's because sometimes when you've trained your eyes to see a certain shot for so many years, if you can trust that you're already bang on line before you step in and you've stepped in perfectly, if what you're looking at down over the cue doesn't look right compared to your habits, then close your eyes.
Closing your eyes.
Interesting. All right. And
very, very significant thing, because it tells you a lot of things. Closing your eyes and opening your eyes.
Yeah. And it's sort of, you know, it's not a gimmick.
No, we're okay. Carry on, buddy. Carry on.
Cool. So yeah, I do. I recognise everything across.
You froze on the screen there, Steve. Maybe you'll come back. Your signal is a little bit slightly distorted there. Just hang on a second, guys. Wait for Steve to come back and play this back. We'll find out that we're just talking across each other. Stranger things have happened. Steve, if you can't hear me, do you want to try and come back in again? I'll take you out and try and come back in again. All right, just took Steve out there for a wee second, guys. See if we can bring him back in again. I hope you absorbed all of that information. We'll be talking about the cue very shortly. Steve has introduced the cue, sight rate cue. We're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about the state of the game as well. We're going to touch on a lot of things regarding that as we wait for Steve to come back in again. I think a lot of significant things there Stephen was talking about in terms of lining up the shot, and I think a lot of us have that problem where we think we're actually lining the shot correctly, or in fact we're not. It's to do with a lot of things, and very often that needs to be observed from someone from the outside. You know, myself and Chris Henry have talked about that quite a few times, but it's very, very significant, as Stephen has mentioned, as we wait for him to come back in again. Guys, you want to send in any questions in the meantime, you're welcome to. You want to send in some views, there's a couple of comments in there already. Just keep sending them in as we try and get Steve back in again. Steve, can you hear me? I can just see you on the bottom screen there. Can you hear me okay? Just give it a few more minutes. I'm sure a lot of you lads out there who are going to Q school are thinking in terms of getting involved with coaches, and for many different reasons. Obviously to improve your game and look at a lot of things that you can't see in your game. And it very often, in my view, needs to be observed by a lot of different coaches from the outside and a lot of good players. And you very often don't get the honest answer that you're looking for in terms of ways to look at the weak parts of your game and how to improve that aspect of it. And that's one of the reasons why we have coaches coming on, why we have players coming on talking about their game. And if you've seen a lot of the streams where we've had professionals on talking about their careers, very often, quite a lot of them on the tour, in fact, have had no coaches, very, very little coaching. They've just really just done it off their own bat and came in and found that it's just easier to try and improve themselves rather than go to a coach. But I think that a lot of players at the moment are looking at alternatives. They're looking at ways in which coaches can help them. I think as we just got Steve back in again. Yeah, Steve, we've got you back.
Yeah, it's the hotel Wi-Fi here, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a broken stream now. I was just talking while you were off the screen there. I was just talking about the reasons why players seek the help of coaches and why, and it's how important it is for players to have people from the outside, good coaches, take a look at their game and help them. And we're going to be talking about coaching. We're going to be talking about junior coaching a little bit later on. But let's just try and pick up where you left off there, Steve, if you can remember.
I think it's me sort of trying to explain getting the perfect sighting and aiming correctly, understanding how you see straight from a coach's perspective, and then putting the technique behind all of that. So those that do it differently can often reach limits, and they can become very frustrated. And look, we know that snooker itself is quite a game of almost a disorder. You know, it's an obsessive disorder. We love the game, but most people will lose unless they win a tournament. So, you know, some of the things that you have to contend with as a player and in your development, I always used to remember one of the early coaching books, you know, get good coaching that will help you accelerate your game or spend years trying to find some answers. And there are many players that will try and continue finding years to get those answers. Now, what we're not dealing with, obviously, is the element of character, temperament, as some would say. But hey, if there's one thing that you want to put aside in your game is the technical issues, then get them put aside. I had the pleasure of spending lovely time with Bob Torrance, bless him. He's passed on. And, you know, this guy was Stevie Gallagher's coach, swing coach. And Bob Torrance used to say in his gruff voice, do the right things and you will improve. And I'm not very good at impersonations there, but, you know, if you imagine that in a gruff voice, this was a terrific man, a wonderful golf coach. And do the right things and you will improve. And my reply to Bob was, knowing what the right things are is also the secret. Knowing what the right things are. Which brings me back to the cricket coach who wouldn't allow me to take the middle off guard. Because my sighting line is slightly to the left. And anybody who understands cricket, if you're batting to the right and your body and shoulders or your head is turned towards the line that the ball is coming, will know that once I was put further back to middle leg would mean that I was looking across the line that the ball was coming to me at, left to right. And that's why I got bowled within 3 balls. Couldn't see the ball coming. Now, you know, I've seen 1 or 2 comments on the side here, and there's 1 or 2 trolls that are on the line at the moment. I've seen them, and I think there's a disgrace. And this game needs to be rid of those sorts of people. Yeah, I'll say it, facts. You know, one of them just continues in the game, you know, and it's a disgrace. And people like that need to be shifted out of the game. So that troll will know exactly who I mean he is, and he needs to shift. So if you're going to troll on here, go. If you want me to name the name, I'll name it. Mr. Paget, please leave the site. Go and troll somebody else. Facts.
Look, I think that there's times when they come on and make comments unnecessarily. So, guys, if you're going to come on live stream and make irritating comments, you know, you're really, all you're doing is you're embarrassing yourselves. Simple as that. You know, hang on, Steve. You know, if you're going to come on and make comments about anyone we've got on here and you don't agree with them, then just man up a wee bit, show a wee bit of common sense and ask a question instead of making comments. You know, it's not something I'm too keen on, Steve, but you know, we don't get it an awful lot. I've had it on the other streams that I do, which is probably more of a bit of
well, you know, we live in a game where
this game needs to be cleaned up. Mental health awareness week last week, and we've seen so many players in our sport suffering during lockdown, and they've had the courage to come out and say these things. And anybody in the sport who's going to behave in such a way that is harassing or in any way unacceptable behaviour, I believe the WPBSA needs to clamp down on it, and clamp down on it fast. I believe they have a duty of care to every player in the game. Let's get back to normal, Dave.
Anyway, Steve, just moving on. I want to talk about big issue here. There's a lot of guys going to preschool. There's a lot of players out there who are aspiring to get on the professional snooker tour, and they're looking at a lot of different ways to improve their game. They're trying to work out a lot of stuff. They're trying to figure out how to improve their weaknesses, how to assess themselves, get themselves ready, and decide whether they're good enough to make a living on the tour. What does it take? Now, you've seen a lot of players come and go. You've seen a lot of amateurs. You've seen a lot of guys go to preschool, and you've seen a lot of those players at the lower end of the tour who are really, a lot of them, Steve, are never really going to make a living. So what have they got to do? What have these lads got to do? What sort of things have they got to do to take themselves a little bit further?
Can I answer that in two ways? All right, would you mind? Part one is, I think, that without doubt, Barry Hearn came into the game, saved the game, and raised prize money beyond all recognition. When we start talking about £15 million on tour, and Barry believes that giving opportunity to everybody is key, and rewarding the highest performers and the most successful. And he's done exactly the same in darts. His passion for rewarding success is huge. But I'm from a high performance and a performance development environment, and I fully recognise that. Reward the top performers, of course, but you also have what we call the also runs. When I look at a high performance grid, I will look at the stars, the potentials, the also rans, and I will also look at the troubles, the problems. Okay, so I'll put the tour into four categories, and I could put every one of those 128 players into a specific category. Now, there may be some people that are problem players who could become high potential and then turn into stars because they develop later. And there was the narrative will say, well, Barry Hearn has done great for the job, great for the tour, and because there's so many players, so many tournaments, players are playing better. But if I look back, one of the key successes, 5 years with Stuart Bingham, 9 titles and a world championship. He was a self-confessed journeyman, and it wasn't just the number of tournaments. It was because he started to do things right. And there are some people that are late developers in their career, and Stuart was a late developer. And I think it's very important for the tour to support all players. So what's very important for me in the first part of the answer is I believe the tour has a duty to protect those at the bottom as much as reward those at the top. I don't believe any professional snooker player should go on tour and come off tour. If I use the word broke, what I mean is broken by the tour, not broke because they overspend, but broken by the tour. I believe that there should be a minimum level of prize money. And if that's a percentage calculation towards the first round, so in the world, let's say 5,000 to the first round winner, I think 1,000 could have gone to the loser and 4,000 to the winner. There were matches that were lost 6-5, and somebody went home with nothing. And if players are going to fall off tour, then fine. If they're not good enough to stay on tour in terms of the system, fine, but they don't need to fall off tour stone broke. So I think there should be a modicum of pay at the bottom end through the prize money structure. And I don't think it affects the top end, because actually first round prize money could be split 25, 75%, winner and loser. So someone goes home with something, not BFH in the words of Bullseye. Well, it's not even BFH, is it? It's expenses down the pan and it's a loss. It's not like golf, where people will compare and say, if you don't make the cut, you don't get paid. That is correct. But in snooker, we're a knockout environment. It's a knockout tournament. You don't play 2 rounds and hopefully you'll be on the top 72. It's a knockout environment. You could be playing great snooker and play the world number 1 and lose. And I don't believe it. Sorry, go on.
Steve, do you not think there's too many professionals on the tour? I mean, let's have a look at the numbers here in terms of business. Got 128 tour professionals. A lot of the guys at the bottom there are barely making a living. That tells me it's bad business. There's too many people there.
Well, you can do one of two things really. You can either say, deal with what I said in terms of the prize money, then you could sustain 128, or to a degree, only to a degree, mind, but it would be a low level of pay, or you cut the tour down. But if it's still going to be first round losers don't get paid, it doesn't change the situation. You're going to have 49 to 64 go broke, roughly, give or take. So I think pay at the bottom end, should recognise that they're a professional. They come through a qualifying process to be a professional. They've earned tour status, recognised by the tour as a professional, and I think they should be paid as a professional. But I don't want to take anything away from the very high level environment, because there is one thing that Barry also claims, and he's 100% right. His process of, I'm going to use the word brutality on tour, sport is brutal, is that he has raised the game. If you look at the standard on tour, it's huge now. The strength and depth is huge, but there is still a lacking in certain areas of the game when you look at some of the lower ranked players and the newer players, because they're not coming on to the tour with the level of what should I call it, craftsmanship that so many of the older players have developed. But if we turn around then and say, okay, there's part one, I believe the tour should be a safe environment, but not a sanctuary. So I don't believe people should just get on tour to earn 30 grand, 40 grand minimum. But what I don't believe is that someone losing first rounds everything should be less than maybe 15 grand a year to survive at least. They're going to drop off the tour, don't forget. So if they are not good enough in terms of prize money, they're going to drop off. So it doesn't change that bottom end in terms of are you good enough or bad enough to stay on tour. So there's my view in terms of prize money. It can be easily resolved, and I don't like to think of players going broke when they're trying to contribute and they've worked and devoted their life to what they want to try and do. I think that in turn reflects further down the line. At the moment, sadly, is it easy to recommend becoming a World Snooker Tour professional as a career? Is it easy for anybody to give that career guidance? There is no career guidance. There's a structure of sorts, but there's no real career guidance. There's no one best way for juniors to be taught the game, because all different coaches are doing all different things. We'll talk about the junior program maybe later that we're bringing out, but there's no one best way, is there? Because I've got different coaches doing different things, and I've seen it on the internet. So different accredited coaches are doing different things. So juniors coming up through the game have either got what some people call natural talent, but they don't have the ring craft that some of these older players have. And then you've got players who perhaps believe that they're better than they are because they haven't been tested in amongst these better players. Because if you look at the tournaments that you put on, the only way you get tested is if you're out playing against the next world champions, the next world title winners, the next tour winners. So your pro-am structure and that kind of structure, the tournament structure, for people to get really strong ring craft just isn't there. And there's a part of me that I feel that these forthcoming pros, they've kind of been, I'm going to use the words, it's hard facts for me, I'm going to use the words, I feel they've been let down a bit. I feel at the bottom end, the development pathways are not providing what they should be providing. The junior club pathways are not providing what they should be providing. So consequently, we'll have talent come in from other areas, and I think the UK is struggling.
I mean, players are making mistakes too, Stephen. I mean, I talk about. I mean, I talk about maybe the fact that there's too many professionals on the tour, but that's not without reasons. There's many reasons why I say that. I say that because I feel that, you know, there's quite a big difference in standard, I think, on the tour between the top 32 and the rest of the crew on there, which makes me think, should there not be a pro amateur qualifying tour and maybe an elite 64 tour, and then maybe split the money up that way a little bit, you know, and then you can look at it from that perspective. Yes, your view is shared by many others. You know, Chris Henry, Barry Pinches, and a lot of other players on the tour, senior players on the tour who've been on the tour for 20 years, believe that maybe some of that money should be spread out a little bit more, because after all, these guys have qualified as tour professionals. They've got on that tour. They maybe deserve something as a reward for playing that first qualifier. It is quite difficult, but I mean, are players not making mistakes themselves, though, Steve? I mean, are players making bad decisions?
Well, there's delusion, isn't there, to a certain degree, and that sort of sounds hard, but you know, there's dreams. You know, there's a dream out there. You know, go to Q school, become a pro, and be a Judd Trump. You know, that's a dream. It's easy to sell a dream. The reality of making that dream come true, you know, requires the level of vocation, dedication, and getting everything right that Barry Hearn talks about. There's not much money in our sport for these amateurs. They're not deemed as elite athletes the way they are, for example, in Hong Kong. You know, an amateur snooker player in Hong Kong could be in an academy and, you know, and have a wonderful time to a degree. Okay, you know, almost to the point where is there a value to becoming a pro? You know, we don't have the funding in the UK for this sort of stuff, but equally we don't have I don't think we have the development pathways, the development structure in the UK to make, or more importantly, to help juniors and youths become better than they thought they could be. You know, so consequently, they measure themselves against their own local people. They measure themselves against their own various local standards. They don't understand the pressure of a tour, and so consequently, they go into it rather blind. Why? Well, if you look at good management companies in golf, they will recommend when an amateur turns professional. It will be part of the structure. We don't have many management companies anymore in snooker. You know, there's nobody to really career guide these people.
Stephen, this is a big problem. I think we've got structural problems right across the board here, and they need to be looked at. And a lot of those stem from the very beginning, the very grassroots. Are we getting away from grassroots here? Are we getting away from the things that we should be looking at here in terms of junior coaching, development in the game? Are we getting away from all this?
No, I think ultimately, from top to bottom, there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect where perhaps people are not listening to the right people, the people who really are involved in the grassroots. Just running a tournament for juniors doesn't work the development side. Different standards of coaching juniors. You know, you have to question that. You know, I look at it and think, well, doesn't a junior that I coach deserve the best from me, the same as I give to Ronnie O'Sullivan? If Chris was seeing a junior, you know, that junior is seeing the best coaches in the land. But when we turn around, arguably, and some people might argue this, but if you look at the two main coaches on tour, it's Chris and myself. So, how many juniors are accessing this level of knowledge? They're not. So within our network, within the global network, Stephen Hendry will say sight right is the one best coaching method to follow. That's his view, and we'll be rolling out junior stuff. We want somebody in Glasgow, a junior in Glasgow, to be trained exactly the same way as the junior in Bristol or the junior in Norwich. Not that they're not all individuals, they are. But technically, there's no real, what I would call, one best way for these juniors to learn and to catch up with the modern game. The modern game is not the blueprint that is being coached. Now, that's hard.
It's very true. Juniors, I think it's difficult to coordinate these things. It's difficult to very hard. It's really hard work with juniors, and it's hard to get them to watch this kind of thing, the kind of thing that we're talking about, the kind of things that me and Chris Henry have been talking about, over the last few months. It's very, very difficult to actually get them. A lot of the juniors that I know are really good. Some of them are really potential tour professionals, and they're just not asking the right questions, Steve. They're not watching. They're not watching and listening to these. They're not asking the right questions. There's some of them are getting very bad advice. Some very bad guidance from sponsors and other people, and sometimes too much pressure. But quite a lot of the juniors that I've seen, I just wish they'd maybe get involved. This is one of the things we're trying to do with the pro-ams, and this is some of the things I want to speak to you about when I see you this week. At the Stratford Club that is going to introduce a juniors coaching program where we're involving some ex-professionals. So, is that the way forward here? How far do we need to take this, Steve, in terms of getting juniors in the right direction? What do we need to do fundamentally?
I think the game changer element in this is making sure that we talk to the right people who can influence at the right level, not be told from upwards downwards. And I think there's a lot of that goes on. There's a whole infrastructure in the UK of snooker, but actually you've probably got a greater number of youths playing pool than they are playing snooker. And you've only got to look at some of the big clubs that have and house so many more pool tables than they do snooker tables. So there's a reason there. There's a reason. If juniors won't waste their time anymore, if they can't do something, they're off. They'll want to learn quickly, and they'll want to do things quickly. They want to complete things quickly. Juniors are far more advanced than we ever were in our day. Their dexterity with different things is completely different. Their understanding, they're seeing football at a different level. They're seeing tennis at a different level. Every sport has moved forward, but I don't believe I don't think the availability of access to high quality, and I mean high quality coaching, is there. And that's not to be disrespectful to so many coaches that are working in their junior clubs, because lots of these are working so hard, but it's not coordinated. There's not one thing bringing them all together, so there's no measure. So if I turn around and look at the reason that we've launched the Sight Right accredited clubs, is because we want the coaches to choose the coach for their club. We want the club to be owning the responsibility of coaching that goes on in their club. We want it to be a good arrangement. We want it to be a win-win situation. Just to walk in as a coach into a club and see a client, and the club not know whether or not that was good or bad, just isn't right to me. Alan Sugar wouldn't allow that sort of process in his shop, and every snooker club is a shop. Every snooker club has customers, and those customers deserve the best. And the club managers that I'm speaking to at the minute, that's what they want. Now, that means that puts a whole onus and emphasis on the people that are delivering a service in that club needs to be seen by that club as being the best, or the best that they can get, or doing the best and delivering the best. So there's an accountability there.
Let's talk about snooker clubs and snooker academies, Steve. What do they need to do? What are snooker clubs who are really interested in getting involved with juniors, maybe partly thinking about setting up academies, coaching academies, and I mean we don't have that many snooker academy. We've got Ding's Academy up there, which is bringing a lot of really talented lads and kids, but are they doing enough? What do clubs and academies need to do here?
I would happily run a full conference at Ding's Academy. You know from the discussions that we've had that I'm enjoying a lot of good stuff at Ding's Academy. We're doing our coach courses there. We're running those. We're running coaching weeks there, UK and international coaching weeks. But I've got governing. I'm in talks with certain people, development officers, etc., within governing bodies who feel that they can't coach without sight right as part of their coaching module. And, these things become very important to us. So governing bodies, clubs, what they're wanting is that they're wanting to move forward, and they're wanting to move forward quickly. So for any club, league, I'm happy to run the appropriate conferences at Ding's Academy or online for these people that wish to understand what makes a good junior academy. How can we get juniors into not the clubs, the leagues? How can we get, how can we get an interest, and I mean an interest because I know Chris Lovell has done an awful lot of work in schools, but is that translating into those people in schools coming into clubs? There's a big difference here because, certain coaching levels are not really teaching snooker. Well, we want to teach snooker. I don't want to teach maths. I don't want to teach, I'll do the adding up in a break. I want to teach snooker. If we've got juniors that want to play snooker, I want to teach them. If we want to give schools an opportunity for this sport to be recognised as a sport, we want to teach them. So the junior, I've been having a discussion with one or two people. I've got, I know that Carlisle District League don't have any coaches in their league. Hey, how can you ever run a junior development program in a league that doesn't have any coaches? So we've got a disconnect going on. So I've kind of got to the, lockdown for me has been really strange because the world has been crazy with the world qualifiers and and I felt I'd been away for months. And I've seen players almost lose their minds, because of certain things in the sport. But for me, the root cause is where we need to go to solve this junior development in the UK. And that root cause has not been identified by other people, in my opinion. And I believe and we'll have more discussions on Wednesday. I believe this can and has and is obvious. And sometimes what's obvious misses people. We have a wonderful network in the UK of snooker. But people need to be involved and empowered in helping that grow. And I believe that it's certain places where we can affect that and give people the opportunity to really contribute and to make them feel valued, where they can then want to actually develop things in their respective regions and areas. And I think it starts there. But let's face it, if I go to a school and I offer a program, and the program comes with the backing of what the individual has achieved, that school is probably going to be interested if I can support it with results. In the UK, do we really recognise snooker as a sport at the minute?
Well, perhaps maybe that's not the case. It's going to take a bit more work there. Just
So,
touch on.
will schools recognise it as a proper sport? So therefore, there must be, I should imagine, in certain schools at the minute, there's probably conversations that go on, that maybe see it as I don't know, do they really see it as something that they would support? Would they send children to a snooker club instead of sending them to a cricket festival?
No, they will not. That's not the feedback I'm getting. The feedback I got from some colleges is that if one of say a junior, if you want to call them, the kids are not at college or school. Say some kids are at school at the age of 15 or 16. If they have very obvious ability and have got on the tour, like some 16-year-olds have actually got themselves on the tour. The question is that too young? Are they too young to get on that snooker tour? That's debatable, but and the feedback I've been getting, Steve, is that if they're good enough to turn professional on a snooker tour, then that they will be endorsed. They will be supported. That's the feedback I'm getting. Just like if they were a professional sports person in cricket or football, or they were offered a contract, to sign for a football team at the age of 15 or 16, then the schools and the colleges do nothing but support that very, very naturally.
Yeah. And they support it because it can be seen as a bona fide career in a career guidance module. And at the moment, you don't really have footballers coming away from the sport not having earned any money. And I think if we change this, then maybe the attitude will change towards these people that are pushing up. But it needs to go down through the levels. So when we turn around and make comparisons, I think people who graduate for the professional tour need to graduate and earn a minimum salary when they go on that tour. And I believe that the secondary tours beneath need to really be, I think there needs to be a look at them, a very, very close look at them. And then even beneath that. And I don't think that we have a tiered structure throughout the whole career progress of a snooker player that kind of puts it into the qualification and classification of a sport.
Steve, let's talk about the expense of this. Okay, well, we haven't touched on that. All right, this is quite important. I mean, snooker, like any, you want to call it a hobby, you can call it a hobby. These are not lads who are just going down at the weekend to have a game of snooker. A lot of these kids are spending a lot of hours in the snooker halls. Okay, so they're spending a lot of money playing on a good quality table. I mean, a lot of good clubs have got star tables, very fast cloth with professional conditions, and they're paying up to £10 and £12 an hour. And they're investing a bit of money. So it's not just the cost of playing time in their clubs. It's investing in a table in the house if you're very privileged to have that space, for one thing. If you have a sponsor, it's okay too. So if you have a sponsor, that's great. There's that financial support. But in terms of coaching, how do we help this problem in terms of expenses?
I think it then comes back to if we work on a pyramid, if we look at the bottom line and we start saying healthy junior academies in various counties and clubs, healthy junior academies, where the club can see the value investing in looking after those players and developing them through the tournament process. If you've got a good, healthy club, you'll normally have good, healthy conditions. So I think a natural growth skill level in those people will come by almost like an organic growth. If we then turn around and look at those people who feel at a young age that I must have my own table because I want to become a pro, and the standard on the pro circuit is such that I need to be playing on the same conditions, we're talking about elite juniors that want to accelerate quickly, and I see no problem in that. So I think the difference between, we talk about juniors will develop, and all players will develop at different stages in their lives. From a junior to a youth to an adult to almost, a 30-year-old. So if we turn around and look at those development structures, if we then turn around and say, well, how do we service those particular layers? Then I think the junior and the development of the game would grow a lot quicker. But at the moment, what we have is we have juniors who are few in number to a degree, who are then wanting the best conditions because that's what they see on TV, or they're going into certain tournaments where that's what they see, and suddenly it becomes a craze. It's like a local junior golfer playing at his local club, but wanting to play on the conditions of Wentworth, and it just doesn't happen. Where you get those conditions is in high-level pro-ams or high-level junior elite competitions, where you get used to those. Conditions. So, if I look at someone like Stephen Hendry, he's happy playing on a club table. A good. When I say club table, it's a good star table, but he's not bothered about all the lighting. He's not bothered about whether or not it's the TV lighting, whatever. It's a table.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the difference in terms of cloths and the difference in terms of playing conditions seems to vary so much, and the way that these conditions are put in place at certain timings is what makes people further down the line, as we push down, suddenly think, well, unless I have those conditions, I can't play this game. So I think there's a mentality towards I must have better conditions to play better snooker.
Mm-hmm. Getting a bit of attention here. What do you want?
There's also the element that says, from a technical point of view, there are many of us top coaches who perhaps need to understand that the difference in terms of reaction and the way club players play on a normal club table is completely different to what we've got on match tables. So if the sport understands that, then the sport would make sure that we provide for that difference, the disparity in terms of superfine cloths, like a 12 stint meter at Wentworth, compared to a typical high-level profile pro-am, where the club has got the greens in perfect condition, but they may not be Wentworth style, but they are still in perfect condition for a high challenge tour. We now want a challenge tour that has all pristine star tables. And that's some of the problem. Is there enough money in the game to provide that middle level? Are people expecting too much? Maybe. Maybe. I would rather see money put into an awesome pro-am circuit, an awesome mid-tier circuit, the development tour as we learn to understand it, be it the challenge tour or the Q tour, whatever that's going to look like when it comes out. I'd rather see prize money put in there, good prize money. I would rather see pros who qualify for the tour card in Q School next week or in later on this month, get £5,000 for qualifying, so it kicks them off and gives them a bit of a start in finances. I'd rather see those in the top 16 on the order of merit get a couple of grand, for their performances in Q School. I'd rather see that than perhaps spend fortunes on some of the things that are being spent fortunes on.
Let's touch on Q School, Steve. Okay. Let's talk about Q School. Okay. What are your views on Q School? The format, the qualification, the numbers getting on the tour, coming off the tour. Do you have any views on this? Is there ways we can improve this?
Yeah, I think. Look, a bit. I'm not as entrenched in the idea of the open draw as barriers from the old days, but what I do remember from the old days is that the typical 8 up, 8 down was a pretty good structure. Now, obviously, we're dealing with a bigger tour. I would probably take a look at however many tours are relegated, however many pros are relegated. I think there should be playoffs from a Q School against those relegated pros. I don't believe those pros should be back into Q School because I don't believe it's fair on the up-and-coming section of players for bad luck or good luck in a draw to be drawing a seeded player. I believe the seeds are right, but I don't believe the structure is right. So the structure that they've given, I believe that the relegated pros should be seeded, but I don't believe the relegated pros should be in the Q School. I think the top players in Q School should play off against the relegated pros.
My understanding, if I'm correct, Steve, my understanding of this time round is that it's seeded.
Yeah, it's going to be frightful because all of these amateurs, unless some of them, I guess, in the UK have been breaking the law, because unless they had elite status, they shouldn't have been practicing. And my argument there would have been that maybe Q School could have been out earlier in the year in terms of entries, so that those people who entered would have been given elite status to practice and be ready for Q School. So there's a lot of amateurs, UK amateurs, who will not be ready for this Q School. And perhaps, I don't know what the numbers are, but someone said there's about 120. So I believe numbers are considerably down. But I feel sorry for those amateurs, one, that haven't been able to practice because it's their dream. These people want to play the game. They want to become professional. They're dreaming about it probably every day. You know, wake up in the morning dreaming. Snooker is their life. And they're going to, by luck of the draw, end up against certain seeded players who've been playing on tour all 2 years. You know, 2 years have been playing on tour, and there's some good players that have dropped off, and they've dropped off for a multitude of reasons. Si Ju Hee, I always forget how he pronounced his name. Si Ju Hee, you know, I think was recognised, I think, by even Stephen Hendry, one of the best young Chinese players. He's dropped off tour. You know, and so is it right for an amateur that's had no Q Tour, no Challenge Tour, no competition snooker over the last 12 months? Is it right for those players to pay money and be potentially drawn up against one of those seeded players in each tournament?
It's very, Steve, a very bad decision in my view. Very negative feedback from a lot of the players, amateurs I've spoken to. Spoke very negatively of this. They feel it's a very, very bad decision.
Yeah,
it's a bit of a step back.
I voice my, that, as I call it, the hard facts. If we're going to have the pros in Q School, I do think the pros should be seeded, because I've seen many occasions they've been drawn against each other, and I just don't think that is correct. But I don't think it's correct that the relegated pros are in Q School. So therefore, I wouldn't have that position. I would be playing Q School, and from the order of merit of Q School, which is, as Barry Hearn always wants, he wants a fair playing field. He makes that statement many, many times, and a fair playing field for Q School is not having relegated pros in it. Relegated pros, I think, deserve to have a playoff against the top, however many they are, from the order of merit. Be it best of 19, a proper playoff, not best of 7 or best of 9 or 11, a proper best of 17 that gives both parties a fair and equal chance, except for the fact that the relegated pro does have the advantage. But if the people from Q School have come through Q School, at least they've got play under their belt. So, would I have relegated pros in Q School? No. Would I have a playoff? Yes, it used to work, and it used to work brilliantly.
A lot of these pros are going to get back on, Steve. They've dropped off. I don't know. I can see up to half of them getting back on again. Can you not?
It's weighted in there.
Why is that?
You know, the evidence would suggest that, you know, the odds. Listen, you know, you'll laugh at me really, because sometimes when someone comes to me and says my player can be world champion, I will just pick up the betting odds and say, well, let's have a look at the odds. Look at what the odds would be in Q School, you know, and then ask yourself, is that a fair and equal playing field? So if Si Ju Hee is against, I don't know, let's say, for argument's sake, Sydney Wilson. I'm not writing Sydney Wilson off. So Sydney, if you're on the line, you know exactly what I mean here. Si Ju Hee is going to be favourite. If it's someone who's coming up through the ranks and hasn't as much experience as Sydney Wilson, then the odds on for Sejourné is going to be huge. You know, and if the bookie was laying odds for those pros to be re-promoted, I think that would evidence that it's not a level playing field. Now, you know, put all the amateurs. You can't mix, in my opinion, relegated pros with amateurs. You play off against them like football does. You play off. You have a playoff. There's certain people that can get promoted, so you could argue that the top 4 people in Q School get an automatic promotion, and the next lot play off.
Yep. That can be a level playing field. See your views on that there, Steve, very clear. You know, and I think that a lot of players are going to Q School thinking and knowing that up against it. I gather numbers this year, by the way, are very low in terms of players. I've been told it's around about 120 entries.
Yeah,
Is that significant? Is that obviously due to COVID, practicing?
I feel for the amateur scene. I really do. I think, you know, between we've had these discussions. The junior and the amateur scene needs investment, and I'll be frank. The women's tour needs investment. I think decisions that are being made around these elements, possibly because investment isn't there. I don't know. But as a sport, the women's tour needs investment, just like the ladies' golf, just like the ladies' tennis. And then we wouldn't be having some of the issues that and some of the feelings that came out over wild tour cards. They're not wild cards either, they're qualifying cards. But when you look at the amateur scene, you know, being world amateur champion should really mean something. Being English amateur champion should really mean something. We're not a global sport if certain standards in certain countries wouldn't really warrant Olympic status. And there's so many countries at the moment that wouldn't really warrant, because, you know, the standard just isn't there. We've seen it. But, you know, does it mean you have to give something to an entity to try and move it forward? I don't believe that. I believe you create the opportunity within those entities to raise the standard to then qualify. And I'm looking at juniors and I'm looking at amateurs, the amateur scene. We need to raise the standard, and we need to raise the standard with investment in it. That means a motivation to play. So provide these amateurs with a motivation to play. Look, I'm going to state a hard fact. If there was the same money on the women's tour as there was on the men's tour, would the women that were given a tour card stay on the men's tour? Well, the main tour, it's not the men's tour. They wouldn't. I'm sorry, but they wouldn't. They play on the women's. That would be my view. So the amateur tour needs money. The women's tour needs money for the benefit of all of the women's tour, not just one or two people. The women's tour needs money. It needs investment. The amateur scene needs investment. If that has to come from the pool of money that comes into the main tour, why not? Why not take a percentage? Why not have a negotiation with the sponsors, who obviously I know COVID has affected? So I'm asking for an ideal world here. But why not commute some of that money, some of that sponsorship into the respective tours to fund them? 15 million.
Very difficult decision.
Sorry?
For World Snooker to make there, Steve, in terms of money, because a lot of that money is sponsored. In fact, all of it's sponsorship money. Sponsorship money comes with everything else, doesn't it? It comes with marketing, comes with television, it comes with betting, it comes with every single bit of little marketing tool you can possibly come up with in terms of promotion and entertainment on TV. Yeah. So, I mean, not all that stuff comes together, does it?
It doesn't, but there's negotiation that goes on within that, and the betting companies need need the sport, I guess, as much as we need them. And you know, I know some people would prefer us to get sponsorship money from elsewhere. And look, the people who bring in this money, you know, what a wild, you know, amazing attraction of funds to the sport has happened. But we can't allow the bottom end to die. We can't allow the amateur game and the junior game to actually fall off a cliff edge, because that's what's happened to 14 pros on tour this year. They fell off the cliff edge, you know, and some people will say, well, they fell off because they weren't good enough. Well, there were different things that happened through the year. COVID affected one or two. You know, if we look at the amateur tour, it needs money. If we look at the ladies tour, it needs money. And if we look at the junior, it needs structure. It needs what I call a development structure, not just a competitive structure.
And I think that's a big area we need to fix. That's just where let's touch on the bottom end there, Steve. Let's touch on the bottom end. Let's talk about amateur snooker, okay?
Amateur.
So amateur snooker in general, okay. I get people coming to me saying, why don't you create an amateur tour? I think it's very difficult for me to create an amateur tour outside what I'm doing, because there has to be an end goal. There would have to be something like a tour card. There would have to be something a little bit better than the Q Tour, to which I'm not particularly impressed with. You know, there needs to be something a little bit better for amateurs in terms of taking them where they want to be. Okay, so how do we improve the amateur game? What do we need to do?
I'm going to answer that in two parts. We've seen events where they've allowed amateurs to go and pre-qualify for main tour events, Germany or wherever it was. The various different, you know, I forget what they were called, and they were paying something like £500-600, not just to enter, but for flights, accommodation, and they were going through 3 or 4 days of qualifying, and invariably none of the amateurs made it to any stages at pro level. They all went out the last level. So what is it that is making these amateurs enter something like that collectively, individually and collectively, whereas if suddenly all that money could be put into the tournament of their own and then receive a prize money, because none of them got any prize money. Now, is it because they're going for a jolly? Is it because it's a day out? You know, I remember Steve Davis once saying some people go for a day out. Is it a weekend out? Is it a trip away? Or actually, do those people genuinely believe that they're going to a professional tournament? So I could never understand, to a degree, why so many spent so much money for nothing. Because very few got through, if any. I think only once or twice. So we're talking about, I guess the numbers were something like 200 people going in for these. I might be wrong, all right, but quite a lot. So the amateur scene does have money. Otherwise they wouldn't have entered. Now that may have changed in terms of COVID. I think it's something that you touched on earlier. The tour card, the Challenge Tour, the Q Tour, it hasn't materialized properly yet. There isn't a clear structure. There isn't an acknowledged structure. One guy didn't get entry into the world this year, even though he was like 3rd or 4th on the order of merit. So what is the Challenge Tour? What is the order of merit? What status does it have? Why should anybody who's 3rd or 4th on the order of merit be second choice to anybody else in terms of a tour, in terms of a place in the World Championship, when actually they've already been into 1 or 2 tournaments as top-ups from the order of merit? What is it? Why is the order of merit on a Challenge Tour seen as second to anything else? If it's because the sponsor wants them, well, sponsors rule. But I don't think it was. You know, it was decisions made for other reasons. So the order of merit needs to be a status. It needs to be, you know, a really credible tour where every amateur looks at that and thinks, this is worth being on. Now, for that to happen, there needs to be prize money. If that means the entries are paid out to a certain degree, obviously there's costs going on here, but there is money in the game. We know there's money in the game. So the amateur tour needs funding. If it's funding within the amateur's prize money being paid out, if it's giving it over to somebody like yourself to run something that is independent, something where the prize money comes in, there's an order of merit structure in place that everybody sees is being run totally, completely fairly. I'd have been furious if I'd have been the individual who didn't get a place at the World Championship when I was next on the list, when actually invites to the World Championship, when one person couldn't make it, it was given to another. And I've invested in tour school. I've played my heart out to get on to third or fourth on the order of merit, and then an invite gets preference over me for a World Championship. I would have to look at it and say, why would I pay £1,000 for that tour? Now that sounds like huge criticism, but these amateurs need to be treated. The ones that go on Q School, they are our next layer of world champions, tour winners, title winners. They're going to come from that pool, and I don't think that they're given enough status. Now that doesn't mean to say that they should be spoiled with what they believe to be the finest of tables in the world, that actually might be taking the money away from them that is needed in prize money for it to be a credible tour where they can actually make a living. Like maybe years ago, Martin Clark, probably, he used to clean up on virtually every tournament every weekend. Nigel Bond, Barry Pinchers, to name just but a few. They used to be, if you were good, if you were in the top 8 on the amateur circuit, you would probably do pretty well on the tour, on the amateur pro-am circuit. And I think there's a mix between how we credit certain tours and how we really reward these amateurs to keep them highly motivated.
I think the amateur game needs a lot of focus. I think you touched on the possibility of an amateur tour. I couldn't create that without sponsorship money, and in that respect, I don't think I could do that. It's difficult. I'm not too concerned about an end point being a tour card. I think that one of my jobs as an events organizer is really to make a very clear to players about decisions they're making. But rather than that's why I have a very short format where players can decide whether they're good enough. My events are designed for top amateurs and lower ranked professionals who can just keep themselves in shape really and keep themselves tested if they don't win their qualifying matches. That's the whole purpose of my format. But
what you do, Dave, is running amateur tours is incredibly important. Carol started in my day. You used to turn up at tournaments and there was 128 booked in, and there used to be a waiting list, but there used to be good prize money. Now, me as a player, if I looked at what I'd spent as an amateur on tour with the amount of money that I spend in hotels or entry fees, and then I took a view commercially, if I was paying £200 for a tournament where I was likely to get something out of it, if I did well, maybe last 16, I'd prefer to go into that tournament. The problem is we've got tournaments that are not paying out. They're not paying out. So if you had 128 people, let's quickly do the maths. If you run 128 people and it was £100 entry, 12,800. I would have no problem as a person who's played this game for most of my life of paying you a healthy percentage of that to run that tournament, and then all the rest of the money goes out. And the club supports it because ultimately a rotation of clubs around the country, everybody contributes and we run a great scene. Now, if 13,000 comes in and you're paid £3,000 for the weekend and 10,000 or £7,500 or £8,000 goes out in prize money, everybody wins. You win, the club wins, the amateurs win. But that isn't happening. That's gone. Why is it gone? Why has it gone? Why can't there be, you know, in fairness, why can't there be 10 tournaments a year for these amateurs, paying £1,000 over the course of the year, £100 a tournament on that basis? You run 10 tournaments, make 30 grand out of it. You're entitled to make 30 grand out of it. You're entitled.
Well, I think setting up the structure of that is probably the difficult part there, Steve. I think that, you know, looking at large numbers, looking at 64 entries, you know, looking at the number of people who are realistically going to pay that sort of money.
They are paying it. They're paying it.
They'll pay it, but they need a venue. They need a venue, and you know those, as I say, the old days, the days of those 16 table snooker clubs are long gone. You know, the days of us. I think we're at a stage at the moment where, you know, I mean, I'm looking at the possibility maybe next year of a snooker academy or developing some of the clubs that I'm using into a snooker academy, and that, you know, we'll talk about personally. We'll talk about those things midweek. You know, and there's lots of potential for that to happen, but it needs funding, it needs proper organisation, and you know, it needs a very healthy, well organised setup. It's very difficult to do. It's not easy to do, and I think
what you're saying is it needs a dedicated individual to be paid appropriately to run what is the amateur game in the UK. And I fully agree with you, and it's worth a good salary. And therefore, when we turn around and look at the money in the game, all the pros will get the value out of their game. I'm going to say something now that kind of, you know, I don't look, hard facts. There are many golfers who have set up beautiful academies. I know 2 in Scotland, all right? They set up good academies for the future of the game. They fund them. They fund them themselves, and then they go on and they get other funding because of the way. But golf tends to have more money injected. We understand that. But the players are involved. The retired players, to a degree, or the players nearing the end of their career. Now, snooker isn't like that. It's not like that. But something could be done. Something has to be done. And if that means funding from the sport itself, then it needs to be looked at. And if it means, you know, that we have good people who are prepared to run good tournaments and serve the sport, then they should fund it, because the sport has the funds. So you looking at what you're doing, I think should be funded by the sport. The sport wants to get funded by the government. But hey, there's a lot of people that will say the funds are there. Now I might be completely wrong with that, you know, but there's a lot of people that say the funds are there. I don't know. I don't look at the accounts. I don't know. All right, but the sport needs it. It's funding the top end of the game. There's the bottom end of the game that are falling over a cliff edge financially. And then there's the amateur game, which has got no money in it. Correct? And then there's a junior game, which actually, you know, is broken for me beyond what it should be.
Steve, just before we wrap this up, okay, we've run nearly as long as The Godfather Part 1 here.
You've taken me down a
live stream. You know, a lot of very personal information provided from yourself, and a very good discussion. What advice? We're going to wrap this up very shortly, and we'll finish off with this, Steve. What advice would you give those lads who are going to Q school next week? What advice would you give them in terms of how they prepare themselves and everything else? What advice would you give them?
I will look at a lot of pros, and I will go into an element of high performance management. I would say to all the pros, all the amateurs, the pros are applying for their own job. Okay, that's how I explain it to the pros. The relegated pros, They're in a restructure. They haven't lost their jobs yet. They're reapplying for their own jobs, but there's less jobs than the number that were there. Okay, so they're reapplying for their own jobs. So they've got to be better. They've got to be better than they have been all season, and they've got to have the right mindset in applying for their own jobs. They've got to play to win. When we turn around and look at amateurs, there'll be some amateurs who really, really believe they've got a chance. Okay, then there'll be other amateurs that are there because they're looking for experience. Then you've got amateurs that maybe are looking for experience and are probably out of their depth. So here's the thing. Pressure occurs when perceived skill is less than perceived challenge, or where perceived challenge is greater than perceived skill. So there will be a number that will feel pressured, they will feel under pressure, and they'll realise that. The ones with less expectation, lower expectations, the ones that are there for experience, will probably feel less pressure. The ones that are there applying for their own jobs again, all right, will feel pressure, but if they realise that their skill level is way above the challenge, then they'll come through comfortably. I've had some amateurs try to contact me for coaching before Q School. I won't do it. And the reason I won't do it is because it's too late. We're at Q School. They should have thought about that a year ago. And I'm not being harsh to them. I'm being realistic. You know, I support the pro that I've got, who's at Q School, and I'm dedicated to that pro. So for me, other players have left it too late. But relax. For those that are going to enjoy it, enjoy it. For those that have the dream, set themselves three bars. One, through the course of Q School, what would be the minimum expectation, performance expectation that they would expect? So would they like to finish top 35 on the order of merit, or top 14 or top 20? What would be the minimum expectation that they would deem to be a good Q School? Secondly, the next bar, what would they see as excellent? So they're in Q School, would they see minimum being, okay, I win 3 matches, or minimum being I'm in the top 50 on the order of merit, or minimum being I win all my first round matches, or I'm in the top 20 on the order of merit? It's up to those players to decide in a performance management criteria what those two levels are. Then the third one is what would be the champagne moment? What would be the most amazing week for them? Some could have an amazing week and only finish top 10 on the order of merit because they might see it as the amazing week. For some, the amazing week might be tour back or get a tour card. If you can imagine all of the relegated pros, their minimum expectation may not be to get their tour card back. On the other hand, it may be, and it depends where they sit, because some people who have been relegated from the tour, if they are genuinely only in the top quartile of the amateur circuit, then actually maybe top 10 on the order of merit might be the minimum that they expect, so they get top-ups. So that career guidance for me, that performance guidance will vary according to each player. But there comes a time when you have to say to yourself, what will I be happy with? All right? And what do I expect? Because when expectations exceed skill set, pressure occurs, underperformance follows. I wish every one of them good luck, because I know what it means to them. I wish every one. I think there's a couple of good juniors in there, and those good juniors, may spoil 1 or 2 results. That in turn, then you question, is that a right format? All right, but Barry Hearn's view is sport is brutal.
There's a lot of Steve. There's a lot of ex-professionals going back there to torture themselves even more.
There will be torture. You know, I always remember Barry saying one of the most intense pressure he ever felt as a pro was falling off tour. And, you know, to go back to Q school, having already felt that pressure requires a really, really good mindset to then immediately get your tour card back. You know, there's some really good amateurs out there, and what we do know is that probably maybe 75% of Q school entries should probably be quite strong, because there's one thing that we do know in high performance management. 80% of those who are underperforming know they're underperforming.
There we are, guys. I hope all of that information is going to help you in some ways. You know, myself and David have probably given you a little bit of a headache over the last hour and 50 minutes. I can't remember how long we've been on here, Steve. But packed with information. Guys, you're going to Q school. We wish you all the best for Q school. I've done the very best for you. We had Chris Henry on last week. We've got another top guy here giving you much advice. You know, this, by the way, all the videos on here, guys, they get uploaded on YouTube on the Pro Am Snooker TV page. And in the coming weeks, I'll be interacting with the likes of this chap here and many others, and coaches and sponsors and clubs who are involved with some great coach. And we're all going to try and interact with players. That includes juniors and amateurs, professionals on the tour who want to come along and play. Most of you probably know by now all my tournaments are scratched. There really isn't very much between any of you who come and play in my tournaments every week. So get involved. If you want to get involved, just drop me a line. Thanks very much, Stephen, for coming on and giving it a review on everything.
At Q school. All right?
No problem.
And all the clubs that have opened up today. All right? Very important.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us, guys. Just stay on the line there, Steve. And I'll catch you all again soon, guys. Good luck to everybody at Q school. Going to give it a break for a few weeks. And maybe we'll get some of you guys who have reached the tour. We'll get you on here and we can talk about your feelings and everything else. Thanks for joining us.